Nebraska is canceling everything from its spring game to its home-and-home series with Tennessee. Is Coach Matt Rhule on the same page with his athletic director? Locked on Big Ten starts right now.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Sheeman, 40 years as a sports talk show host and play-by-play announcer, and I want to thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hit that free subscribe button down below if you don't mind. That really helps us out. We always appreciate that. The Huskers have two different stories about cancellations. We're going to get into that a little bit. Ryan Day still undecided what to do with the Buckeyes in spring football, and Tom Izzo is on an absolute tear. Plus, we'll have our basketball picks going into the weekend. But Nebraska football has been in the news and been on this podcast, and recent decisions. We've been talking about it a lot to drop their spring game, caught a lot of people's attention, and also their upcoming home and home series on the schedule with the Tennessee Vols. That's been canceled and replaced. So I'm starting to wonder if Coach Matt Rhule and new athletic director Troy Denon are on the same page regarding scheduling, or maybe a more accurate way to put it, they're on the same page. I think they've both agreed to cancel all this stuff, but their messaging has been completely different on this deal. So I'll explain that in just a second, because I caught Rhule. He was on a podcast along with Urban Meyer and Rob Stone. And he talked about scheduling and the challenges of scheduling as a football coach. And first of all, like I said, there's been a lot of discussion about the Huskers scheduling as of late. So first it was the spring game in April. It's been canceled. One of the most successful spring games in all of college football. Had 60,000 people show up to see the Huskers play last spring. Of course, they had freshman phenom Dylan Rhule. Everybody wanted to get a look at him. And people came, but people always always have the passion for Nebraska football out there. So spring games, those have always been popular. A lot of people are disappointed that has been canceled. Now, Rhule gave some reasons as to why he was doing that. And we discussed them at length here on this podcast, but a quick recap. Look, he doesn't want his players getting scouted on TV. The Big Ten Network will carry it. And then his players get poached and tampered with by other schools for the spring transfer portal. And he doesn't want to risk any players getting injured in a spring game that really doesn't mean anything. Last year, he lost 6 players after the spring game on the last day of the spring transfer portal, and he lost 2 players in the spring game with season-ending injuries. That's 8 players right there. 8 players that you had plans for the upcoming season that were gone. So while his decision was disappointing, it's understandable. And then there was the controversial decision last week where Nebraska decided that they were going to bail on a home-and-home series, 2026-2027, with the Tennessee Vols. And that game would have been great for college football. Fantastic. Maybe not great for Nebraska if they end up chalking up another loss. But, these non-conference games, these big matchups with blue bloods, they're great for college football whenever we can get them. But Rhule was saying, and he was talking directly to Urban Meyer on this, and he said, hey, man, we're playing 9 games in the conference. Why in the world would we want to schedule a tough non-conference game? And he said, well, why would anybody ever want to play those games? And he feels, and many would agree, that the playoff committee, at least this first go-around with 12 teams, they put an overall emphasis on your record and how your team is playing late in the season. They didn't seem to balance strength as schedule as much. I think that's a fair argument. I think Matt Rhule has a strong point there. Look, Indiana, and I'm an Indiana grad, okay? I loved it. But Indiana got in the playoffs with an 11-1 record. And their only ranked opponent was that loss to Ohio State. So had the Hoosiers scheduled, Texas in September, and they finished 10-2, would they have still gotten in the playoffs? I don't know. 10-2, pretty good, but it felt like Indiana was kind of on the bubble and getting in that 12-team playoff field. So I don't know for sure. I don't have the answer to that question. For the record, though, Indiana beat Nebraska pretty badly, 56-7. So I would suggest that Indiana was still a good football team. In fact, Indiana's only 2 losses all season long were to Ohio State and Notre Dame, and both those 2 teams played in the national championship. They only lost to the teams in the national championship. So I think they were still good. But you could talk about their strength of schedule, no question about it. But that's the route that Matt Rhule wants to take. He's basically looking at Indiana and say, look at that. Didn't really have any tough pre-conference, early non-conference games. Went through the conference, 1 loss in the playoffs. He's not wanting to rack up losses before he gets into Big Ten play. I get his point. I get his larger point. However, I would argue that I think scheduling one really good team in September out of conference, I think it's good for college football. And I think it's good for the teams as well, because it gauges where your team is. Coming off a long summer of practice, now you go play somebody good. You really get a good measuring stick, a good feel for how you are. And if not, you get to see what areas you need to get better, because teams that are better than you will expose certain areas that you need to tighten up. And I'll also argue you can afford that extra dangling loss out there if 12 teams are getting in the playoffs, if you're any good. That still means you got to get through the conference. But I see both sides of the argument. I really do. We don't have to like it, but it is better for college football. I mean, how great was it to see Coach Prime in Colorado come in as a ranked team and take on Nebraska at the start of this past season? It was a great win for the Huskers. The year before, 2022, it was Oklahoma. Now, that didn't work out so well, but man, it's great to see Oklahoma and Nebraska, 2 blue bloods, looking at those jerseys, those old school teams going at it like that. I think it's good for college football. This year, looking ahead to the Huskers schedule, I mean, Cincinnati comes to Nebraska. Cincinnati's not what they had been under Luke Fickell just a few years ago. It would have been a much better game a few years ago, right? Instead, you get teams like the Akron Zips, Houston Christian, not Houston, Houston Christian. Those are the teams coming to Memorial Stadium. I mean, come on. Let's not go so far the other way that it's kind of goofy. In 2026, Bowling Green, North Dakota, not Tennessee. 2027, Northern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, not Tennessee. That would have been great. Would have been great. So it's strength of schedule. That's the issue for Rhule. He says you're crazy to go add these extra games. He wants to win games. He wants to go to bowl games. He wants to go to playoff games. That's what he's paid to do. So, and he might lose the Tennessee game. Hey, what would be great? You go play Tennessee and you beat them. Then you move up in the rankings. Then it allows you another hiccup later on in the season. Maybe you weren't expecting. Everybody has one of those. There's always a game on the schedule that you're supposed to win in your mind that you don't. But you go end up beating a team like Tennessee in September. That carries a lot of weight. Anyway, a lot of coaches feel the way that Matt Rhule does. Some will actually say it out loud, like Matt Rhule. Others won't. Anyway, but okay, so that's his reason. Okay, and that's why we're getting rid of Tennessee. He doesn't want the extra tough game on the schedule. Great, fine. That's his reason. Just a few days ago, we talked about it here on Locked On Big Ten. Nebraska Athletic Director Troy Denon gave a different answer as to why they canceled the Tennessee games. He said, "Look, man, we got renovations going on here at the stadium. We can't handle the crowd of a Tennessee game, but more importantly, since we're going to have a smaller crowd for our games, because the stadium parts of it won't be available, the year we're supposed to go to Tennessee, we're going to scratch that. We're going to schedule another easy home game so we can fill that out and make up for all those smaller crowds we had because our stadium's being worked on. We need like an 8th home game. So sorry, Tennessee, we can't go." That was his reason. Fine. I get it. Revenue is an important deal, but it's a very different answer than Matt Rhule gave. I mean, the same result. We're not playing Tennessee, right? No Nebraska Tennessee games, but 2 very different reasons as to why they're not on the same page. I would just say from a PR standpoint, Maybe they should probably get on the same page with their answer and tell us why they really canceled the Tennessee series. Maybe both answers, two things can be true at once as well. Hey, funny sidebar on that conversation that Matt Rhule was having with Urban Meyer. Urban talked about how early in his career, he always admired the crowd and the atmosphere in Lincoln, Nebraska. And he told a story that early in his coaching career, he was there at Lincoln and he put on a hat and sunglasses and hid and got on a golf cart to drive into the stadium just to feel and just to see the atmosphere, just to check it out, maybe learn from it. Going incognito. I don't know if it was necessary for him to do that. Maybe he thought that the fans would have rained down some booze on him. I don't know. It sounds a little like Connor Stallion stuff, hanging out with the shades on the sidelines, trying not to be noticed. Kidding a little bit. But anyway, that was a funny story. Hey, be sure to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button down below and follow Locked On Big Ten for free wherever you get your podcast. That way you get the latest episode of this podcast as soon as it becomes available each and every day. And if you don't mind, share, follow, and like, because that helps us out too. Don't forget, we have a website, talkbig10.com, number 10, and Twitter as well, at TalkBig10. But talkbig10.com has all of our podcasts and links for you to buy merchandise. If you're a Nebraska fan, get a Nebraska shirt, hat, pennant, all right there. Just click for your convenience as you're checking out podcasts from Locked On Big Ten about your favorite team. All right, so some other things I want to talk about here. First of all, I want to talk about canceling spring games or whatnot with Nebraska. What about Ohio State? I want to get into this because Ryan Day apparently still doesn't know what he wants to do in the space where the spring game normally was. We'll discuss that as well. We'll get inside his head. And Tom Izzo and Michigan State are on a tear as we look ahead to the weekend basketball schedule around the Big Ten. All that coming up in 1 minute right here on Locked On Big Ten. Let me tell you about Fabric. This is Fabric by Gerber Life. Okay, life moves fast. Lots going on, especially if you have family. And one day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and then before you know it, they're off to college. And that's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes. Boom. In many cases, no health exam is required. You get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Free digital wills, access to investment accounts. It's all part of this. So check it out. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes and meet at meetfabric.com. That's the site, at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Well, thank you, everybody, for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen each and every day, especially you everydayers out there. Meanwhile, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. That helps us out a lot. Always appreciate that. And share, follow, and like Locked On Big Ten, your team every day. And don't forget our website, talkbig10.com. So, what is Ohio State really going to do for spring football? They got spring practice. They're going to have that. But the spring game basically has been canceled, like Nebraska's. Or is it going to be a spring showcase? Or is it going to be a scrimmage? Or is it going to be some sort of fan festival? Coach Ryan Day said that, he didn't want to do a regular spring game, like a regular game like they did last year. That was on national TV, by the way, because his Buckeyes have just played 16 games. And that's long for college students. And that was on their way to a national championship, of course. And he didn't want to put his team through another game. All right, I get it. Having said all of that, tickets are still being sold for some sort of ambiguous event in April. Now, this week, Ryan Day talked to the Columbus Dispatch, and he said he still needs some more time to figure out what he wants to do. And they're gonna come up with something to cap off spring practice, but he just doesn't know yet. And he's a couple more weeks to figure it out. He says he does want the younger guys to feel what it's like to go to the stadium on a game day and get that feel, as opposed to waiting for the season opener in the fall against Texas in a huge game like that. So he kind of wants to get the guys. He's got a lot of young guys that have never played before. And so he said there's some value in setting up a game day situation at that big, humongous stadium so that they're not, intimidated on the first day that they get to play and all that kind of stuff. So for the time being, Ryan Day says he just wants to see how the first couple of weeks of spring practice goes before making any decisions. Basically, he wants to make sure they get through it healthy, right? Like if he starts racking up injuries, he's going to probably tap the brakes on any kind of event there. But if they're healthy and everything's going well, it seems like he's opening his mind to doing something on that, and kind of we'll figure out what that is. But that's going to be a couple of weeks before he decides exactly what he wants to do. On a personal note, I like spring games, not only as a fan, but professionally. I like to get an early look on some of the new players. It helps me out, helps out this podcast. But I got a feeling that a lot of these spring games are going to be going by the wayside and become a thing of the past. In the meantime, by the way, people are still buzzing. If I may switch gears for a moment, talk a little basketball. People are still buzzing about Michigan State the other night, a couple nights ago. Trey Holloman hit that 65-foot three-point heave from beyond the half-court logo. It was beyond that as Michigan State beat Maryland. The game was tied when he threw it up there, and they win 58-55. Even Tom Izzo says, yeah, that was a lucky shot. But he followed that by saying, well, our team overall deserved to win that game. So obviously he was glad it went in. Pretty good. I got a fun fact here for you for the Spartans. Obviously, they're in the midst of a great season here. But they did have a skid a little while back, right? When they lost 3 out of 4. That was the stretch where, look, every night Tom Izzo was chasing Bob Knight's all-time Big Ten wins mark. He just couldn't do it. They just kept losing, even to Indiana. Eventually they won games they needed to win, and he got the record. So congratulations. And just kind of icing on the cake to what's been a pretty strong season for Michigan State so far. They bounced back from that skid. They're back to their winning ways now. And so they've got 2 road wins against ranked teams. They also beat the Ducks and the Boilermakers at home. So they're beating some really quality teams here. And they really look like they're poised for the Big Ten tournament. And of course, March Madness and the NCAA tournament. So somebody pointed out on Twitter, and I found this. I'm not going to put this on Tuesday tweets. I want to talk about it right now. There are 10 major men's basketball teams that have won 7 or more road games this season. And there have been 10 major teams to win 5 games where they were an underdog this year. Only one team has done both. Michigan State. They're just winning on the road. Good teams, ranked teams, underdogs. They're just winning, putting it all together. They were underdogs in the Maryland game. I believe they were a 4.5-point dog in that game. They ended up winning by 3. Doesn't matter how it shapes up. Tom Izzo and the Spartans are looking pretty good. All right, so let's take a look at the schedule coming up. A lot of great basketball here this weekend. A lot of things I want to talk about here while we do it. Big Ten basketball tonight, men's basketball. UCLA is at 20th ranked Purdue. Matt Painter has lost 4 games in a row. He's going to lose 5. I mean, UCLA is good. Mick Cronin's got his team playing pretty well. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern. For you on the West Coast, UCLA fans, 5 o'clock Pacific tonight on Fox. So check that, the big Fox network. Also tonight, Iowa is at Northwestern, 9 p.m. Eastern on FS1. So we got some Friday night hoops to check out here. Saturday, 16th ranked Maryland is at Penn State. Maryland, obviously coming off the disappointment. They got to shake off that Michigan State loss. They were sorely disappointed there. At Penn State, Penn State has been struggling. They hung in there with Indiana on the road the other night, but they're one of the lower teams in the rankings for the Big Ten. So Maryland's looking to bounce back at Penn State. That is a noon game Eastern on Saturday on the Big Ten Network. Minnesota is at Nebraska. That's at 2 o'clock Eastern on the Big Ten Network. And then Southern Cal is at Oregon, a West Coast game after, I think it's a 4:30 game. I'll have to double check that, but I think it's 4:30 game, Big Ten Network. And then, in fact, that is 4:00, Big Ten Network. Indiana's at Washington. That's a long trip. 6 p.m. Eastern, 3:00 Pacific, if you want to check it on the West Coast on Peacock. And Indiana, like I said, they just got by that game against Penn State. Malik Renew didn't play. Like, he was fine at shoot around and then got really ill, like had to be hospitalized. Haven't heard yet, as of the taping of this podcast, if he's got fluids and bounced back, and whether he's going to make that trip to the West Coast of Washington. Maybe not. So we'll consider that when we do our basketball picks in just a minute. Also on Sunday, men's basketball. This is going to be a good one. This is going to be some must-see TV. 11th ranked Wisconsin. Well, was it last week? They lost an overtime game to Oregon. They are at Michigan State. Red hot Michigan State. That's a 1:30 game on CBS Eastern time. That's the game to watch. Again, no more football. We're 3 weekends away removed from football? I know you're still going through withdrawal with the NFL season done, but we got some great college basketball for you. Wisconsin at Michigan State, 1:30 on CBS. And then Illinois is at 15th ranked Michigan. That's a 3:45 game on CBS. So right after it. So doubleheader. Wisconsin, Michigan State, followed by Illinois at Michigan. And I don't know what kind of shape Illinois is in. They've had so many injuries and sickness. And then, they got pummeled by Duke. Was it 43, 47 points, something like that? 43, I think it was. It was bad. That was bad. All right, on to women's basketball over this weekend. Nothing tonight, Friday, but Saturday, we got Minnesota at 23rd ranked Michigan State. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern on Big Ten Plus. The big game for women's basketball might be all of basketball, to be honest. Number 4, USC with Juju Watkins taking on number 2, UCLA at Pauley's. 9 p.m. Eastern, 6:00 Pacific, Saturday on Fox, the big network. By the way, speaking of Juju Watkins, she just landed another name, image, and likeness endorsement with United Airlines. Her middle name is Skies. Juju Skies Watkins. I mean, it's a great basketball name. It's a great airline name. Whatever. In fact, that's the ad. It's a picture of her in her uniform holding a basketball underneath a 727 United Airlines airplane. And it's got her name up big, Juju Sky Watkins, and in parentheses, yeah, that really is her name. It's good. It's a cool ad. She's racking up all these deals. She got deals with Chipotle, State Farm, NYX Makeup, Nike, Gatorade, Spotify. Her nil value is estimated to be around $765,000. That's not a bad way to make a living if you're a 20-year-old kid. That's awesome. She's averaging 24 points a game and 7 rebounds, and the Trojans are 25-2 going into that UCLA game. So that'd be one worth watching. Again, that's Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6:00 Pacific on Fox. Sunday, women's hoops. We got Michigan at Illinois, 1:30 Eastern on the Big Ten Network. Penn State is at Rutgers. That's a 2:00 Eastern. Indiana at Purdue. That's always big, men or women. 2 p.m. Eastern on Peacock. Nebraska at Northwestern at 3:00. And Wisconsin is at Iowa. Iowa's still a big deal, even though no Caitlin Clark. 4:00 Eastern on Peacock. And then a top 25 matchup between number 12, Ohio State, and number 19, Maryland. That's 4:30 on Fox. And Oregon is at Washington for a West Coaster. 5:00 Eastern, 2:00 Pacific on Sunday. All right, those are the games. I'm going to pick a handful of those games, those great basketball games, kind of the best of the best. And we're going to go on the record because that's what we do here. We're going to go on the record. We're going to make our picks. And I'll have all that for you and send you off into the weekend right here on Locked On Big Ten. Speaking of picks, how about Prize Picks? March basketball. And you can get into the action with Prize Picks. Best way to play for daily fantasy sports with Prize Picks. Here's what you do. You pick players, you put them together, as few as 2 players, maybe a few more, and then say more than or less than with specific stats for those games. Player projections, if you will. You get them right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, it's easy. It keeps every game even more exciting. You can build your lineup. For example, you could say, I'm looking at Jason Tatum, more than 29 points and Karl Anthony Towns more than 12 rebounds, and Kyrie Irving more than 7 assists. Put all three together. They all hit. Bam. Awesome. Prize Picks even offers weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College. That's the code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, it's time now for our picks. Our picks on the record. I'm going to pick a handful of men's game and a couple of women's games. I'm going to put them full screen here. In case you're on audio only, no problemo. I'll describe it as best I can what's going on. So I got 6 games on the board, men's games here. And we're going to start it off with UCLA at Purdue. Again, the big issue here is, UCLA's good. Purdue's good, but they're struggling. Has Matt Painter ever lost 5 in a row? They've lost 4 in a row. And because of that, and because, UCLA is coming from the West Coast, I like Purdue in this one. I think you go with Purdue. They're not dropping 5 straight. They got to get themselves ready for March, the tournament. Also, I got Maryland at Penn State. Again, I know Maryland was disappointed with that buzzer beater against Michigan State. Now they got to go on the road to Penn State, but Maryland should win this game. So I'm taking the Terps. USC at Oregon, West Coaster. Oregon started off the season pretty well. Then they dipped. I think they're starting to put it back together. I think this is a bad time for USC to go up there and play Oregon, plus Oregon's at home. So give me the Ducks. Indiana at Washington. Again, I mentioned, I don't know if Malik Reneau is going to be available. And if he is he going to be that strong? He was really sick in the hospital this week. So and then Indiana making that long trip to Washington. I actually like the Huskies in this game. Wisconsin is at Michigan State. This could be a great game on Sunday. I'm not getting in the way of Sparty. I have all the respect in the world for Wisconsin, but I think I want to take the Spartans, Michigan State, for this one. And Illinois at Michigan. I really like Michigan. I know Michigan had a disappointing loss to Michigan State last week. Illinois is just too sick and banged up, and Michigan is going to win this game. All right, now let's take a look at the ladies. 2 games I want to highlight, the ones we just talked about here. Number 4, USC, and number 2, UCLA, 9 o'clock on Fox. Look, I expect a big game out of Juju Watkins for USC, but UCLA, man, number 2 team in the country, and they're at home. I like UCLA in a squeaker in this one, and then Ohio State and Maryland, a couple of ranked teams. I think the Buckeyes, Ohio State, I think they win this game. That's 4:30 on Fox. So those are my picks. I'm on the record. What do you say? Let's hear it in the comment section. Always appreciate that as well. If you want to give me your opinion on anything we've talked about today, from Nebraska football to anything, to Ohio State, Ryan Day, spring game, Michigan State basketball, we cover it all. That's what we do here. This is the only podcast about the Big Ten, but the only you're going to get Big Ten news, Big Ten breaking news, analysis, and then opinion, all under one umbrella. I mean, some do one thing and some other podcasts will do another. We do it all right here. So tell your friends about us. I know you have friends that are Big Ten alum and fans. Maybe they don't know we're out here every single day. Share the word. Many ways for you to interact. Twitter or X at Talk Big Ten. Number 10, our website, talkbig10.com with the number 10. Podcasts and merchandise all right there at the website. Whatever you do, please hit that subscribe button before you go and follow this podcast right now on your favorite podcast app. You get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Also going to invite you to check out my friends on Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Getting you ready for the month of March. It's here. We're ready to go. It's March tomorrow. March 1st, this weekend. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. For Locked On Big Ten, I'm Craig Sheeman. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk to you Monday. Thanks for hanging out.